The dust on her face was streaked with dried tears when Everett Hadley found her collapsed against the water trough outside the Verdi, Nevada saloon, her cotton dress torn at the shoulder and her eyes staring at nothing in particular. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty Main Street in the summer of 1878, and at first he thought she might be another drifter seeking shade, but then he saw the way she held herself, rigid and careful, like every breath cost her something precious. "Miss." Everett dismounted from his roan gelding, his boots hitting the packed earth with a soft thud. "You all right?" She flinched at his voice, and that small movement told him more than words ever could. Her hands gripped the edge of the trough, knuckles white, and when she turned her face toward him, he saw she was younger than he had first thought, maybe 22 or 23, with auburn hair that had come loose from its pins and green eyes that held equal parts fear and defiance. "I'm fine," she said, but her voice cracked on the second word, betraying her. Everett had been a cowboy for the better part of 6 years, working cattle ranches from Wyoming down to Nevada, and he had learned to read situations the way some men read books. This woman was not fine, not even close, and the protective instinct that rose in his chest surprised him with its intensity. At 26, he had seen his share of trouble, but something about this particular scene made his jaw tighten. "You don't look fine," he said gently, crouching down a few feet away so he would not tower over her. "My name's Everett Hadley. I work at the Bar 7 Ranch about 5 miles out. Is there someone I can fetch for you? A husband, maybe, or family?" The word husband made her face go pale, and she shook her head so violently that more hair tumbled down around her shoulders. "No, please no." That was when Everett noticed the blood, just a small spot on the back of her dress near her shoulder blade but spreading slowly. His stomach dropped. "Miss, you are hurt. Let me help you." "You cannot," she whispered, but there were fresh tears now, cutting clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. "Nobody can." Everett looked up and down the street. It was mid-afternoon on a Wednesday, and Verdi was never exactly bustling, but right now the main thoroughfare was nearly empty. The few people who were about seemed to be purposefully looking the other way, and that made something cold settle in his gut. They knew. Whatever had happened to this woman, the town knew about it and they were choosing to ignore it. "I am going to get Doc Brennan," Everett said, starting to rise. "No." Her hand shot out and grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. "Please, he will find out. He will come for me." "Who will?" She looked at him for a long moment, those green eyes searching his face for something, maybe trustworthiness or maybe just basic human decency. And whatever she found there must have been enough because her grip loosened slightly. "My husband," she said, and the word sounded like poison on her tongue. Vernon Tate. Everett knew the name. Everyone in this part of Nevada knew Vernon Tate. He owned the largest ranch in the valley, the Double T, and he had a reputation for being ruthless in business and mean when he drank, which was often. Everett had never met the man personally, but he had heard the stories and none of them were good. "He did this to you." She nodded, just barely, and then she tried to stand. Her legs gave out immediately and Everett caught her before she could fall. The moment his hand touched her back, she cried out, a sharp sound of pure agony that made him pull back as if burned. "I am sorry," he said quickly. "I am sorry. I did not mean to hurt you." "It is not your fault," she managed, gasping. "He used the whip yesterday. I thought I could manage, but the wounds, they are getting worse." Yesterday. The word hung in the air between them like a curse. This woman had been walking around for a full day with whip marks on her back, and nobody in this God-forsaken town had done a thing to help her. "What is your name?" Everett asked, though he already knew her last name now. "Victoria," she said. "Victoria Tate," though I wish I could scrub that name off like dirt. Well, Miss Victoria, I am going to help you whether you think it is possible or not. Can you walk if I support you? I think so. But where? That was a good question. The hotel would talk. The doctor would definitely inform Vernon Tate, and taking her back to the ranch bunkhouse would cause more problems than it solved. Everett thought quickly, running through his options. I have a friend, he said slowly. Sarah Pemberton. She runs the dress shop at the end of the street. Her husband died 2 years back, and she lives alone above the store. She is good people, and she would not turn you away. Victoria's eyes welled up again, but she nodded. Everett helped her to her feet, moving as carefully as he could, and she leaned heavily against him as they made their slow way down the boardwalk. Every step seemed to cost her, but she did not complain, just bit her lip and kept moving. Sarah Pemberton was a woman in her 40s with silver-streaked hair and the kind of no-nonsense demeanor that came from surviving hard times. When she opened the door to her shop and saw Victoria's condition, her face went from surprise to furious in the space of a heartbeat. Vernon Tate. She asked, and it was not really a question. Yes, Victoria whispered. Get her upstairs, Sarah said to Everett, already moving to lock the shop door and flip the sign to closed. The back bedroom, I will get water and bandages. The stairs were narrow and steep, and Victoria nearly fainted halfway up, but Everett kept her upright, murmuring encouragement the whole way. The bedroom Sarah had indicated was small but clean, with a brass bed frame and a colorful quilt. Everett helped Victoria sit on the edge of the bed, and she immediately bent forward, trying to ease the pressure on her back. Sarah appeared with an armload of supplies. A basin of water, clean cloths, bandages, and a small tin that Everett recognized as salve. She set everything on the bedside table and then turned to Everett with a meaningful look. I need to examine her wounds, she said. This is not proper for a man to see. I understand, Everett said, backing toward the door, but Victoria's hand shot out again, catching his. Please stay, she said, and there was something in her voice that went beyond propriety, some deep need for the protection his presence represented. I feel safer with you here. Sarah looked between them, then nodded once. Turn your back then, Everett. Give her some modesty at least. He did as he was told, facing the wall while behind him he heard the rustle of fabric as Sarah helped Victoria remove her dress. There was a long moment of silence, and then Sarah's sharp intake of breath told him everything he needed to know about how bad it really was. Sweet Lord, Sarah breathed. Victoria, honey, how did you even walk here? I had to get away, Victoria said, her voice muffled by tears. He said he would do worse today if I did not obey him perfectly. I could not stay. I could not. Everett's hands clenched into fists at his sides. He had never considered himself a violent man, but right now he wanted nothing more than to ride out to the Double T and make Vernon Tate feel every bit of pain he had inflicted on his wife. The only thing that kept him still was knowing that Victoria needed him here more than she needed his revenge. This needs to be cleaned, Sarah said, and Everett could hear her dipping cloths into the water. It is going to hurt, honey. I am sorry. Victoria's cries of pain over the next few minutes were almost more than Everett could bear. He pressed his forehead against the wall, his jaw clenched so tight it ached, and he forced himself to breathe steadily. Behind him, Sarah worked with efficient compassion, cleaning the wounds and murmuring soothing words that probably did not help much but were offered anyway. Finally, Sarah said, Everett, I need you. He turned around carefully, keeping his eyes on Victoria's face. She was lying on her stomach now, her upper body bare except for the cloth Sarah had draped across her lower back for modesty. Her face was streaked with tears, and she was biting down on a folded towel to keep from screaming. I need you to apply this salve, Sarah said, holding out the tin. My hands are too stiff these days to be gentle enough. You have steady hands from working with horses. Can you do it? Everett took the tin, his throat tight. I will be as careful as I can. He moved to sit on the edge of the bed, and for the first time he let himself look at Victoria's back. The whip marks were livid and angry, crisscrossing her skin in brutal patterns that made his stomach turn. Some were still seeping blood, and the flesh around them was swollen and hot to the touch. Whoever had done this had not held back. This was not discipline. This was cruelty, pure and simple. Everett opened the tin of salve, the smell of herbs and beeswax filling his nostrils, and dipped his fingers into the cool ointment. Then, with a touch lighter than he had ever used in his life, he began to apply it to the first mark. Victoria tensed under his hand but did not pull away. Everett worked slowly, covering each wound with a thin layer of salve, his movements as gentle as he could make them. The intimacy of the moment was not lost on him, but there was nothing improper about it. This was mercy, not seduction, care given to someone who desperately needed it. I am sorry, he murmured as he worked, not sure if he was apologizing for the pain his touch caused or for what had been done to her in the first place. I am so sorry this happened to you. It is not your fault, Victoria said, her voice muffled by the towel she was still biting. Maybe not, Everett said, moving to the next mark, but I am sorry anyway. He worked in silence for a few more minutes, Sarah standing nearby with fresh bandages ready. When every wound had been covered in salve, Sarah helped him wrap Victoria's torso in clean white bandages, working around her front while Everett supported her weight to keep pressure off her back. By the time they finished, Victoria was trembling with exhaustion, her face pale and drawn. You need to rest now, Sarah said firmly, helping Victoria lie back down on her stomach. She arranged pillows to keep Victoria's weight off the worst of the wounds and then pulled a light blanket over her legs. Sleep if you can. You are safe here. Victoria's eyes were already drifting closed, but she reached out once more, her hand finding Everett's. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for seeing me. The words hit Everett harder than they should have. Thank you for seeing me. As if the simple act of acknowledging her suffering was something rare and precious. What kind of world did they live in where that was true? You are welcome, he said quietly, giving her hand a gentle squeeze before pulling away. Rest now. Sarah led him back downstairs, and once they were in the shop with the door to the stairs closed, she rounded on him with fire in her eyes. Vernon Tate is going to come looking for her, she said. You know that, right? And when he does, it will not be pretty. I know, Everett said. But what was I supposed to do? Leave her in the street? No, Sarah sighed, her anger deflating. No, you did the right thing. I just want to make sure you understand what you are getting into. Vernon Tate is a powerful man in this valley. He has money, he has connections, and he has a mean streak a mile wide. If he finds out you helped Victoria, he will come after you too. Let him try, Everett said, and he meant it. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her expression unreadable. You care about her, she said finally. I can see it in your face. But Everett, she is a married woman and the law is on his side, not hers. The law is wrong then. Maybe so, but that does not change facts. Be careful, for your sake and for hers. Everett nodded, but he was not about to back down now. He had seen Victoria's face, seen the marks on her back, and something inside him had shifted in a fundamental way. This was not just about helping a stranger anymore. This felt personal, important, like a path he was meant to walk even if it led somewhere dangerous. He stayed at Sarah's shop for another hour, sitting in the workroom downstairs, while Sarah sewed and he pretended to read a week-old newspaper. In truth, his mind was racing, trying to figure out what to do next. Victoria could not stay hidden forever. Verdi was too small, and Vernon Tate had too many eyes in his employ. Eventually, someone would talk, and then there would be hell to pay. When he finally left, the sun was sinking toward the western mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. Everett rode back to the Bar 7 ranch slowly, his mind still on the woman he had left sleeping in Sarah's spare room. He had only known her for a few hours, but already she had gotten under his skin in a way he could not quite explain. The Bar 7 was a mid-sized cattle operation run by a man named Jack Crawford, who was fair with his workers and paid on time, which made him a good boss in Everett's book. The ranch employed about a dozen hands, and they all bunked together in a long, low building near the main barn. When Everett arrived, most of the men were already gathered around the outdoor fire pit, eating their supper and swapping stories. "Where you been, Hadley?" called out Ben Porter, one of the older hands. "We thought maybe you ran off to California without telling us." "Just had some business in town," Everett said, dismounting and leading his horse to the barn. "What kind of business?" asked another hand, a young kid named Tommy who was always asking questions. "The kind that is none of yours," Everett replied, but he kept his tone light to take the sting out of it. He took care of his horse, brushing the animal down and making sure it had feed and water before heading to the bunkhouse to wash up. By the time he joined the others at the fire, the conversation had moved on to other topics, which suited him fine. He was not ready to talk about Victoria yet, not until he had a better sense of what he was going to do. That night, lying in his bunk with the sounds of snoring men all around him, Everett stared at the ceiling and thought about green eyes and auburn hair, and the way Victoria had looked at him like he was the first person to see her as human in a very long time. He thought about the promise he had made, not out loud but to himself, that he would keep her safe no matter what it took. And he thought about Vernon Tate, somewhere out there in the darkness, probably already looking for his missing wife. Sleep, when it finally came, was restless and full of uneasy dreams. The next morning, Everett was up before dawn, helping to move a herd of cattle to a new pasture. The work was hard and hot, and it required his full attention, which was probably a good thing because it kept his mind from wandering too much. But as soon as the work was done and he had a spare moment, his thoughts went right back to Victoria. Around midday, Jack Crawford called him over to the ranch house. The boss was a man in his 50s with a weathered face and sharp eyes that missed very little. "Everett," Jack said without preamble, "I heard something interesting in town this morning. Vernon Tate's wife has gone missing. He is tearing the valley apart looking for her." Everett's stomach dropped, but he kept his face neutral. "That's so." "That is so," Jack said, studying him carefully. "He is offering a reward for anyone who can tell him where she is, $500. That was a small fortune, enough to tempt even honest men. Everett met Jack's gaze steadily, trying to read the older man's intentions. "What are you telling me this for, boss?" Jack was quiet for a moment, then sighed. "Because I know you, Everett. You have got a good heart, maybe too good for your own safety. And I saw you ride into town yesterday afternoon and not come back until nearly dark. So if you happen to know anything about where Victoria Tate might be, I want you to be real careful about what you do next." "Are you warning me off or warning me to be smart?" "Both," Jack said. "Vernon Tate is not a man you want as an enemy, but I have also heard stories about what goes on at that ranch of his, stories about his wife showing up in town with bruises and worse. So I am not going to ask you any direct questions, and I am not going to tell you what to do. I am just saying that if you are involved in this somehow, you need to think about the consequences." Everett nodded slowly. "I appreciate that, boss, and I will be careful." "See that you are," Jack said. I would hate to lose a good hand over this, but more than that, I would hate to see you get hurt. Vernon has men who would not hesitate to use violence if he told them to. I understand. Jack dismissed him with a wave, and Everett went back to work, but his mind was churning. $500 was a lot of money, and there were plenty of people in Verdi who would not think twice about turning Victoria in for that kind of reward. He needed to get back to town, needed to check on her and make sure she was still safe. The problem was that riding into town 2 days in a row would look suspicious, especially now that Vernon was actively searching. Everett forced himself to wait until evening, until his work was done, and it would seem natural for him to take a ride. By the time he saddled up again, the sun was low on the horizon, and he had a story ready about needing to pick up supplies from the general store. Verdi looked different in the evening light, shadows stretching long across the dusty street. There were more people out than there had been the day before, and Everett could feel their eyes on him as he rode past. News traveled fast in a small town, and by now everyone probably knew that Vernon Tate's wife was missing and that there was money involved in finding her. He tied his horse in front of the general store and went inside, making a show of buying a few items he did not really need. Then he slipped out the back and made his way to Sarah's dress shop through the alley. He knocked quietly on the back door, and Sarah opened it almost immediately, as if she had been waiting for him. "She is awake," Sarah said without preamble, "and she is asking for you." Everett followed Sarah upstairs, his heart beating faster than it should. Victoria was sitting up in bed now, propped against pillows, still wearing one of Sarah's nightgowns. Her face had more color than it had yesterday, but there were dark circles under her eyes that spoke of a sleepless night. "Everett," she said, and the relief in her voice was palpable. "I was worried you would not come back." "I said I would help you," Everett replied, pulling a chair close to the bed and sitting down. "I am not the kind of man who breaks his word." Victoria's eyes searched his face, and whatever she saw there made her relax slightly. "Vernon is looking for me. I heard Sarah talking about it." "He is," Everett confirmed, seeing no point in lying. "He is offering a reward." Fear flashed across Victoria's face, but she did not dissolve into tears the way some women might have. Instead, she lifted her chin and met his gaze straight on. "Then I need to leave." "I cannot put you and Sarah in danger." "Leave and go where?" Everett asked gently. "You can barely stand, and you have no money, no horse, no supplies. Victoria, you would not make it 5 miles. Then what am I supposed to do?" The fear was cracking through now, making her voice shake. "I cannot go back to him. I cannot. He will kill me this time, I am sure of it." Everett leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, and spoke in a low, steady voice. "You are not going back to him. I promise you that. We just need to be smart about this, need to figure out a plan." "What kind of plan?" "I do not know yet," Everett admitted, "but I will figure something out. In the meantime, you stay here with Sarah, you rest and you heal. Can you do that for me?" Victoria looked at him for a long moment, and then something shifted in her expression, some of the fear giving way to tentative hope. "Why are you doing this?" she asked quietly. "You do not even know me." It was a fair question, and Everett was not entirely sure he knew the answer himself. He could say it was because helping people in trouble was the right thing to do, which was true but felt incomplete. He could say it was because no woman deserved to be treated the way Vernon had treated her, which was also true but still did not explain the fierce protectiveness he felt. "Maybe I do not need to know you to see that you deserve better than what you have been given," he said finally. "Maybe that is enough." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but they were different tears than before, not born of pain or fear but of something softer, something that might have been gratitude or maybe the beginning of trust. "Thank you," she whispered. Everett stayed for another hour just talking with her. He learned that she had been born in Missouri, the daughter of a shopkeeper who had died when she was 16. Her mother had remarried quickly, a man who did not want a stepdaughter around, and Victoria had found herself in a difficult position. When Vernon Tate had come through town on business and expressed interest in her, it had seemed like a way out, an escape from an unhappy home. "I thought I was so clever," Victoria said with a bitter laugh. "I thought I was saving myself. Instead, I just traded one prison for another." "How long have you been married to him?" 3 years. "It was not terrible at first, or maybe it was and I just did not want to see it. Vernon was controlling, jealous, but I told myself that was because he loved me. Then the drinking got worse and his temper, and I realized that what I had mistaken for love was really just possession. To him, I am not a person. I am property, something he owns, and when property does not behave, you punish it." Everett's hands clenched into fists again, but he forced himself to stay calm. "You are not property. You are a person, and you deserve to be treated like one." "I know that now," Victoria said, "but knowing it and escaping it are two different things." Before Everett left that night, he carefully changed the bandages on Victoria's back, applying fresh salve to the wounds. They looked marginally better, not quite as angry, though they still made him furious every time he saw them. He worked in silence, his touch gentle, and Victoria bore it with quiet courage. "He will never touch you again," Everett said as he finished wrapping the last bandage, the words coming out low and fierce. It was a promise, a vow, and they both knew it. Victoria turned her head to look at him over her shoulder, and there was something in her eyes that made Everett's breath catch. "I believe you," she said simply. Over the next week, Everett fell into a pattern. He would work at the bar 7 during the day, doing his job and keeping his head down. And then in the evenings, he would ride into Verdi and visit Victoria at Sarah's shop. Each time he brought her something: food from the ranch kitchen, a book borrowed from Jack Crawford's modest library, once even a small bouquet of wildflowers that he had picked on the ride into town. Victoria healed slowly, but steadily under Sarah's care and Everett's attention. The wounds on her back began to close, the swelling went down, and color returned to her face. More than that, though, something else began to heal as well, something less visible but just as important. The fear that had lived in Victoria's eyes started to recede, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. They talked for hours during those evening visits, sharing stories about their lives and their dreams. Everett told her about growing up in Montana, the son of a farmer who had died in a barn fire when Everett was 12. He told her about learning to ride and rope, about the freedom he found working on ranches where the sky went on forever, and the only limits were the ones you set for yourself. Victoria told him about her childhood in Missouri, about learning to sew and cook, and all the things young women were supposed to learn. She told him about the books she loved to read, stories of adventure and romance that let her imagine a life beyond the narrow confines of what was expected. She told him about her dreams of seeing the ocean someday, of traveling to San Francisco and walking along the shore. "Maybe you will," Everett said. "Once this is all sorted out, maybe you will get to do all those things." "Maybe," Victoria said, but she sounded doubtful. "Or maybe Vernon will find me first." Vernon was a constant shadow over everything, the threat that never quite went away. The reward was still being offered, and the whole valley knew that Vernon's patience was wearing thin. There had been incidents, men roughed up because Vernon suspected they knew something, homes searched without warning or warrant. The law, represented by Sheriff Morris, did nothing to stop it. Morris and Vernon were old friends, and the sheriff saw nothing wrong with a man looking for his missing wife, no matter what methods he used. I have been thinking, Everett said one evening about 2 weeks after he had first found Victoria. You need to get out of Nevada, go somewhere Vernon cannot follow. I have no money, Victoria reminded him, and even if I did, traveling alone as a woman is dangerous. You would not be alone, Everett said. I would go with you. Victoria looked at him in shock. Everett, you cannot. Your job, your life, everything is here. My job is just a job, Everett said. I can find work anywhere there are ranches, and that is pretty much everywhere west of the Mississippi. As for my life, well, it seems to me that the most important part of it is sitting right here in this room. The words hung in the air between them, heavier than Everett had intended. Victoria's eyes went wide, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Everett, Victoria finally said, her voice barely above a whisper. What are you saying? He should have been more careful, should have thought before he spoke, but it was too late now. The truth was out there, hanging between them like morning mist, and there was no taking it back. I am saying that I care about you, Everett said. I know it is fast, and I know you are married, and I know this is probably the worst timing in the history of the world, but I cannot help how I feel. These past 2 weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength and your courage, Victoria, you are the most remarkable woman I have ever met. Victoria's eyes filled with tears, and for a terrible moment Everett thought he had made a horrible mistake, had pushed too hard and scared her away. But then she reached out and took his hand, lacing her fingers through his. I care about you too, she said. I have been trying not to, because it feels wrong and complicated and impossible, but I do. You have been kinder to me in 2 weeks than Vernon was in 3 years. You see me, really see me, and you treat me like I matter. How could I not care about you? Everett's heart was pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. So what do we do about it? I do not know, Victoria admitted. But you are right that I need to leave. Vernon is getting more desperate, and it is only a matter of time before he finds me. I just hate that you would have to give up your life here to help me. I am not giving up anything that matters, Everett said firmly. You matter. Everything else is just details. They talked late into the night, making plans. Everett would give his notice at the bar 7, collecting his back pay and whatever he could scrape together for traveling money. Victoria would stay hidden at Sarah's for another week while her back finished healing and while Everett made preparations. Then they would leave, heading west to California, where the law would be less likely to chase them and where Vernon's influence did not reach. It was risky, maybe even reckless, but it felt right in a way that Everett could not fully explain. This was what he was supposed to do, the path he was meant to walk, and Victoria was who he was meant to walk it with. When he left that night, Victoria stood at the top of the stairs to see him off, wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. Everett turned back at the last moment, drawn by some impulse he could not name, and found her watching him with an expression that made his chest tight. Be careful, she said. Always, he replied, and then he was gone, slipping out into the Nevada night. The next day, Everett told Jack Crawford that he would be leaving at the end of the month. The boss took the news with a raised eyebrow but no argument. This have anything to do with Vernon Tate's wife? Jack asked bluntly. Everett considered lying, then decided Jack deserved better. Yes, sir, it does. Thought so, Jack said. Well, I cannot say I am surprised. You have got that look about you lately, like a man who has found something worth fighting for. Just be smart about it, Everett. Vernon has a long reach. I will be smart, Everett promised. And if you ever need a reference for work, you write to me. You are a good hand, Hadley, and I will not forget that. They shook on it, and Everett went back to work with a lighter heart. He had made his choice, and there was no going back now. The next few days passed in a blur of preparation. Everett sold his saddle and bought a cheaper one, saving the extra money for the journey. He traded his good boots for a serviceable pair and pocketed the difference. Every penny mattered now. Every dollar saved was another day they could stay on the road, another mile between them and Vernon Tate. He also bought a gun, a Colt revolver that he hoped he would never have to use but wanted to have just in case. Everett was not a violent man by nature, but he would do what he had to do to keep Victoria safe, and if that meant facing down her husband, then so be it. It was 10 days after he had given his notice when everything went wrong. Everett was in town, picking up supplies for the journey and visiting Victoria one last time before they left the next morning. He had just stepped out of the general store when he heard the commotion down the street, raised voices and the sound of breaking glass. His gut told him it was trouble, and his gut was right. A crowd had gathered outside Sarah's dress shop, and at the center of it was Vernon Tate. Everett had never seen the man in person before, but he recognized him immediately from the descriptions. Tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair going gray at the temples, and a face that might have been handsome if not for the cruelty in his eyes. He was well dressed in a tailored suit and expensive boots, and he carried himself with the arrogance of a man who had never been told no. "I know she is in there," Vernon was shouting, his voice slurred with drink. "That old witch is hiding her, and I want my wife back." Sarah was standing in the doorway of her shop, arms crossed and face set in stubborn lines. "There is no one here but me, Vernon Tate, and you have got no right to come breaking up my property." "I have got every right," Vernon snarled. "She is my wife, my property, and I will do what I damn well please to get her back." That was when Everett saw Victoria. She appeared at the window above the shop, her face pale but determined, and for a moment their eyes met across the distance. He could see the fear in her expression, but also something else, something that looked like resolve. Then Vernon saw her too, and his face twisted into a mask of rage. "There you are, you ungrateful little wretch. Get down here now." "No," Victoria called back, her voice carrying clear and strong. "I am not going back with you, Vernon. I am done." The crowd had gone silent, everyone watching the drama unfold. Everett pushed his way through the people, his hand instinctively going to the gun at his hip. Vernon was advancing on the door, his fists clenched. "You will come back because you are my wife, and you will do what I say." "She said no," Everett said, stepping between Vernon and the door. "That means you need to leave." Vernon stopped, his attention swinging to Everett for the first time. "And who the hell are you?" "Someone who knows when a man needs to walk away," Everett said evenly. "This is not going to end the way you think it is, Tate. Go home and sober up." For a moment, Vernon just stared at him, and Everett could see the man's mind working, calculating. Then Vernon's eyes narrowed with understanding and fury. "You are the one," he said. "You are the bastard who has been hiding her, who has been filling her head with lies." "I have been telling her the truth," Everett corrected, "that she deserves better than you." Vernon lunged at him, and Everett barely got his hands up in time to block the punch. They grappled for a moment, Vernon fighting with the wild fury of a drunk, while Everett tried to just hold him off without escalating things further. The crowd around them erupted in shouts, some calling for the fight to stop, others egging it on. Then there was a gunshot, loud and sharp, and everyone froze. Sarah was standing in the doorway with a rifle in her hands, the barrel pointed at the sky but the message clear. "That is enough," she said in a voice that brooked no argument. "Vernon, you get off my property right now or the next shot goes lower." Vernon shoved Everett away, breathing hard. "This is not over," he snarled. "You think you can steal my wife and get away with it? I will see you dead first." "Try it," Everett said quietly, "and see what happens." For a long, tense moment, the two men stared at each other, and Everett could feel the violence simmering in the air between them. Then Vernon spat on the ground at Everett's feet and stalked away, shoving through the crowd and disappearing down the street. The crowd began to disperse, people murmuring among themselves, and Everett turned to find Victoria running down the stairs and out the door. She threw herself into his arms and he caught her, holding her tight while she trembled against him. "Are you all right?" she asked, pulling back to look at his face. "Did he hurt you?" "I am fine," Everett said, though his ribs ached where Vernon had connected with a punch. "But we need to leave, Victoria. Now, tonight. He will come back, and next time he will bring men with him." Victoria nodded, her face pale but determined. "I am ready." They worked quickly, gathering what few possessions Victoria had and what supplies Everett had already purchased. Sarah pressed a pouch of money into Victoria's hands, her life savings by the look of it, and refused to take no for an answer. "You use this to start over," Sarah said fiercely, "and you do not ever let that man find you again. You hear me?" "I hear you," Victoria said, hugging the older woman tight. "Thank you, Sarah, for everything." By the time the sun set, Everett and Victoria were on the road heading west, riding double on Everett's horse. It was not ideal, but it would have to do until they could buy Victoria her own mount. They pushed hard through the night, putting as much distance between themselves and Verdi as possible before stopping to rest. When they finally made camp in a small copse of trees, Victoria was exhausted, her back aching from the ride. Everett helped her down from the horse and spread blankets on the ground, making a bed for her near the small fire he had built. "How are you holding up?" he asked, sitting beside her. "I am scared," Victoria admitted, "but I am also free, and that is worth being scared for." Everett took her hand, lacing his fingers through hers the way she had done weeks ago in Sarah's room. "I meant what I said before. He will never touch you again. I promise you that." "I know," Victoria said, and the trust in her eyes was absolute. They slept that night under the stars, Victoria curled against Everett's side for warmth and comfort. And for the first time in weeks, she slept without nightmares. The journey to California was long and hard, made more difficult by the fact that they had to keep moving, never staying in one place too long in case Vernon sent men after them. They traveled through the high desert of Nevada, through small towns and vast stretches of emptiness, always heading west toward the promise of something better. Along the way, they learned each other in the way that only travel can teach you. Everett discovered that Victoria sang when she was happy, old songs she remembered from her childhood, and that she had a sharp sense of humor that came out when she felt safe. Victoria learned that Everett talked to his horse like the animal could understand him, and that he was surprisingly good at cooking over an open fire, and that he had nightmares, sometimes about his father's death, that left him shaken and quiet in the morning. They also fell deeper in love, though neither of them said the words out loud yet. It was there in the way Everett always made sure Victoria had the warmest blanket, in the way Victoria smiled when she saw him first thing in the morning, in the quiet moments they shared watching the sunset together at the end of a long day's ride. About 2 weeks into their journey, they stopped in a town called Elkridge to resupply and rest. It was a decent-sized place, big enough that they could blend in but small enough that the general store owner was happy to see new customers. While Victoria was looking at fabric, thinking about making a new dress, Everett struck up a conversation with the store owner, a grizzled old man named Pete who had lived in Elkridge for 40 years. "You folks just passing through?" Pete asked. "Heading to California," Everett said. "Looking for work and a fresh start." "Lots of people doing that these days," Pete said. "California's got opportunities if you are willing to work for them." "We are," Everett assured him. Pete studied him for a moment, then glanced over at Victoria. "That your wife?" Everett hesitated, and something in that hesitation must have shown on his face because Pete's expression sharpened. "She running from something?" Pete asked quietly. "Or someone?" There was no point in lying to a man who had clearly seen too much to be easily fooled. "Her husband," Everett admitted. "He was not a good man." Pete nodded slowly. "And you are helping her get away?" "Yes, sir." "Well," Pete said after a moment, "I do not know what the law would say about that, but I reckon you are doing the right thing. Man who hurts his wife is not much of a man at all." "I appreciate that," Everett said. "You should know, though," Pete continued, lowering his voice even further, "that there were some men through here a few days ago asking about a woman matching her description. Said there was a reward for information." Everett's stomach dropped. "What did you tell them?" "Nothing, because I had not seen anyone like that," Pete said. "But I am telling you now so you know to be careful. Whoever is looking for her, they are not giving up." "Thank you for the warning," Everett said sincerely. When they left Elkridge, they took a more circuitous route, avoiding the main roads and staying away from towns where possible. It made the journey longer and harder, but it also made them harder to track. Everett kept the gun close now, always within reach, and he slept lightly, waking at every unusual sound. Victoria noticed the change in him, the increased tension, and one night she brought it up while they were making camp. "Everett," she said gently, "you cannot keep going like this. You are wearing yourself out." "I am fine," he insisted, but they both knew it was not quite true. "You are running yourself into the ground trying to protect me," Victoria said. "And I appreciate it, I do, but I need you to take care of yourself too. I cannot lose you." The words hit Everett harder than he expected, and he looked up at her, finding her watching him with an expression that was equal parts concern and something deeper. "You are not going to lose me," he said. "Promise me," Victoria said, moving closer. "Promise me you will be careful, that you will not do something reckless just to keep me safe." "I cannot promise that," Everett said honestly. "Because keeping you safe is the most important thing in the world to me, and if being reckless is what it takes, then that is what I will do." Victoria made a frustrated sound, and then, before Everett could react, she leaned in and kissed him. It was soft and tentative, barely more than a brush of lips, but it sent electricity racing through Everett's entire body. He froze for half a second, then kissed her back, one hand coming up to cup her face while the other settled at her waist, careful to avoid her back. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were breathing hard and Victoria's cheeks were flushed. "I have wanted to do that for days," she admitted. "So have I," Everett said. "But Victoria, you are still married. I do not want to put you in a position that makes things worse." "I do not feel married," Victoria said. "That marriage was a sham from the start, built on lies and control. What we have, this feels real. This feels like what it is supposed to be." "I love you," Everett said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "I know it is fast and I know the timing is terrible, but I love you, Victoria. I have loved you since that first day when you looked at me like I might actually be able to help." Victoria's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling. "I love you too," she said. "I love you, Everett Hadley, and I want to build a life with you, whatever that looks like." They kissed again, deeper this time, full of promise and possibility. When they finally settled down for the night, Victoria lay with her head on Everett's chest, listening to his heartbeat, and for the first time since leaving Verdi, she felt like everything might actually work out. They crossed into California a week later, passing through the mountains and descending into the lush valleys on the western side. The landscape changed, becoming greener and more fertile, and the air smelled different, cleaner somehow, like rain and growing things. They found work at her ranch outside Sacramento, Everett as a hand and Victoria helping the rancher's wife with the house and garden. The rancher, a man named William Ortega, asked no questions about their past and seemed content to take them at face value. They worked hard, saved their money, and slowly began to build a life. Months passed, and there was no sign of Vernon or his men. Either they had given up the search, or they were looking in the wrong places. Everett began to relax, to let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they had actually gotten away. Victoria bloomed in California. Away from the shadow of her husband, she became the person she was always meant to be, confident, happy, full of life. She laughed often, sang while she worked, and talked about the future with an optimism that Everett found infectious. One evening, about 6 months after they had arrived in California, Everett asked Victoria to take a walk with him after supper. They wandered out to a small hill overlooking the ranch, where the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink. "Victoria," Everett said, taking her hands in his, "I know we have been through a lot, and I know the situation is complicated, but I cannot imagine my life without you in it. I want to marry you properly as soon as we can figure out how to make that happen legally." Victoria smiled, her eyes shining. "Vernon never filed the marriage certificate," she said. "I found out when I went through the papers before we left. He kept saying he would do it, but he never did. I think he liked having that control over me, knowing that I was not legally protected. But it means that in the eyes of the law we were never actually married." Everett stared at her, hardly daring to believe it. "Are you serious?" "Completely," Victoria said. "I am free, Everett, truly free. There is nothing stopping us except us." Everett let out a whoop of joy and picked Victoria up, spinning her around while she laughed. When he set her down, he was grinning so wide his face hurt. "Then yes," Victoria said. "Yes, I will marry you, today, tomorrow, whenever you want." "Tomorrow," Everett said immediately. "Let us not waste another day." They were married the next afternoon by a traveling preacher who happened to be passing through, with William Ortega and his wife standing as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, held in the ranch house parlor with wildflowers that Victoria had picked that morning, but it was perfect. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Everett kissed Victoria like she was the most precious thing in the world, because to him, she was. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm after that. They saved their money carefully, and after a year, they had enough to buy a small piece of land of their own, just 20 acres with a little house and a barn that needed repair. It was not much, but it was theirs, and they poured their hearts into making it a home. Everett built furniture for the house, working in the evenings after long days of ranch work. Victoria planted a garden and sewed curtains for the windows, transforming the plain little house into something warm and welcoming. They worked side by side, building a life together one day at a time. 2 years after they left Nevada, Victoria told Everett she was pregnant. The joy on his face was so pure and complete that it made her cry happy tears, and he held her close, overwhelmed with gratitude for this life they had built against all odds. Their son was born in the spring of 1881, a healthy baby boy with his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn chin. They named him Samuel, after Everett's father, and Everett held his son for the first time with tears streaming down his face. "Hello, Samuel," he whispered. "I am your daddy, and I promise to always keep you and your mama safe." Victoria watched her husband cradle their baby, and her heart felt so full she thought it might burst. This was what she had dreamed of during those dark days in Nevada, this feeling of being loved and safe and cherished. This was the life she had fought for, that Everett had helped her claim. They had 2 more children over the next 5 years, a daughter named Rose and another son named James. The little house got more crowded and more chaotic, full of laughter and noise and the beautiful mess of family life. Everett expanded the house, adding rooms as their family grew, and Victoria taught the children to read and write, determined that they would have every opportunity she had been denied. Vernon Tate never found them. They heard, years later through a letter from Sarah, that he had died in a riding accident, drunk and alone. Victoria felt a strange mix of emotions at the news, relief and sadness, and a kind of pity for the man who had wasted his life on cruelty and control. But mostly she felt grateful that his death closed that chapter forever, and that her children would never have to fear him. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Everett took Victoria back to that hill where he had proposed, leaving the children with a neighbor for the evening. They sat together watching the sunset, his arm around her shoulders and her head on his chest, just like they had done so many times before. "You ever regret it?" Everett asked. "Running away with me, leaving everything behind," Victoria laughed softly. "Not for a single moment," she said. "You saved my life, Everett. Not just from Vernon, but from a future without hope, without love. You saw me when I was invisible. You cared for me when I was broken, and you loved me when I thought I was unlovable. How could I ever regret that? I am the lucky one," Everett said. "You made me believe in something bigger than myself, something worth fighting for. You gave me a family, a purpose, a home. Everything good in my life started the day I found you by that water trough." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sky change colors. Then Victoria turned to look at her husband, really look at him, seeing the lines that time and hard work had etched around his eyes, the gray starting to show at his temples, the calluses on his hands from years of labor. "I love you," she said simply. "I loved you then, and I love you now, and I will love you until my last breath." "And I love you," Everett replied, kissing her forehead, "always and forever." The years continued to pass, marked by birthdays and harvests, by small triumphs and occasional setbacks, by the steady accumulation of memories that make up a life. Their children grew up strong and happy, learning the value of hard work and the importance of kindness from parents who modeled both every single day. Samuel grew into a thoughtful young man who loved working with wood like his father, building beautiful furniture that people came from miles around to buy. Rose inherited her mother's creativity and her father's determination, becoming a teacher in the local school and touching countless young lives with her passion for learning. James was the adventurous one, always exploring and dreaming big, and eventually he went off to San Francisco to seek his fortune, writing long letters home about the wonders he saw there. Through it all, Everett and Victoria remained the center of their family's world, the foundation upon which everything else was built. They had their disagreements like any couple, their moments of frustration or worry, but beneath everything was a bedrock of love and trust that never wavered. On quiet evenings, when the work was done and the children were in bed, they would sit on the porch together, holding hands and watching the stars come out. Sometimes they talked, sharing their thoughts and dreams and plans for the future. Sometimes they just sat in comfortable silence, the kind of silence that only comes from years of truly knowing someone. Victoria's back still bore the scars from that terrible day in 1878, faint white lines that never fully faded, but they were no longer marks of shame or pain. They were reminders of survival, of strength, of the journey that had brought her to this life she loved. Sometimes Everett would trace them gently with his fingertips, and Victoria would remember that day when he had first applied the salve, when he had made a promise that changed everything. "He will never touch you again." It was a promise Everett had kept, not just in the literal sense but in every way that mattered. He had given Victoria safety and love and the freedom to become who she was meant to be. He had stood between her and danger, had walked away from his old life without hesitation, had built her a new world where she could flourish. And Victoria had given Everett just as much. She had given him purpose and love, and a family that filled his life with meaning. She had trusted him when trust was the hardest thing in the world to give. She had chosen him every single day, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. On their 20th anniversary, their children threw them a party, inviting neighbors and friends from all over the valley. The little house they had built together was filled with laughter and music, with toasts and stories and the warm glow of community. Everett looked around at the life they had created, at the people who filled their home with love, and felt a profound sense of gratitude wash over him. That night, after everyone had gone and the house was quiet again, Victoria found him standing on the porch, looking out at the land they had worked so hard to cultivate. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, slipping her hand into his. "Just how lucky I am," Everett said. 20 years ago, I was just a cowboy drifting from ranch to ranch, not really sure what I was looking for. And then I found you, and suddenly everything made sense. You are the best thing that ever happened to me, Victoria Hadley." "And you are the best thing that ever happened to me," Victoria said, using his last name, her last name now, with pride. "You saw me when I was at my lowest, and you did not look away. You saw someone worth saving, worth loving, and you fought for me. I will never stop being grateful for that." They stood together in the darkness, two people who had found each other against impossible odds and built something beautiful from the wreckage of a painful past. The stars wheeled overhead, constant and eternal, bearing silent witness to their love. As the years went by, Everett and Victoria grew old together, their bodies wearing down from a lifetime of hard work but their spirits remaining strong. They became grandparents, delighting in the next generation and spoiling their grandchildren in the way that grandparents do. They told stories about the old days, carefully edited versions for the children but the full, honest truth for each other on quiet nights. When Everett's joints started to ache from arthritis and he could no longer do the heavy ranch work, Victoria was there to help him, just as he had once helped her heal. When Victoria's eyesight began to fail, and she could no longer sew as she once had, Everett read to her every evening, his voice bringing the words to life in the darkness. They took care of each other with the same devotion they had shown from the beginning, and their love deepened into something rich and complex, layered with decades of shared experiences and mutual understanding. On a warm evening in the spring of 1908, 30 years after they had fled Nevada together, Everett and Victoria sat on their porch watching the sunset. They were both in their 70s now, their hair completely gray, their faces lined with age, but their hands were still clasped together, and their love was as strong as ever. "You remember that first night?" Victoria asked softly. "When you found me by the water trough?" "I remember everything," Everett said. "I remember thinking you were the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, even covered in dust and tears. I remember wanting to protect you, to make things right, even though I did not know how." "You figured it out," Victoria said with a smile. "You more than figured it out. You gave me a life I never dreamed possible." "We gave each other that," Everett corrected. "This life we built, we did it together." Victoria squeezed his hand and they sat in companionable silence, watching the sky turn from gold to pink to purple. The land around them was peaceful, the air filled with the sounds of evening birds and the distant lowing of cattle. Their children were grown and settled, their grandchildren were healthy and happy, and they had lived to see their family flourish in ways they never could have imagined back in 1878. "I love you," Victoria said, as she had said countless times over the past 3 decades. "I will love you forever, Everett Hadley." "And I love you," Everett replied, kissing her weathered hand. "You are my heart, Victoria. You always have been." They watched the stars come out together, two souls who had found each other in the darkness and created light. Their story had started with pain and fear, with whip marks and desperate escapes, but it had become something beautiful, a testament to the power of love to heal and transform. As the years continued, as seasons turned and children grew and life marched steadily forward, that love remained constant. It was there in the small moments and the large ones, in the quiet companionship of old age and the passionate devotion of youth. It was a love built on a foundation of trust and respect, of seeing each other truly and choosing each other completely. And when, many years later, they finally left this world within months of each other, as devoted in death as they had been in life, they left behind a legacy of love that rippled out through their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. They left behind proof that sometimes, even in the darkest moments, hope can be found. That sometimes the most broken things can be made whole again. That sometimes a cowboy can find a woman with whip marks on her back, apply salve to her wounds, and promise that the man who hurt her will never touch her again. And that promise can become the beginning of a love story that lasts a lifetime, a story of healing and hope, and the transformative power of seeing someone truly and choosing to love them anyway. Their graves stood side by side in the little cemetery outside Sacramento, under the shade of an old oak tree. The headstones were simple, bearing their names and the years of their lives, but to those who knew their story, those markers represented so much more. They represented courage and sacrifice, redemption and rebirth, and above all, a love that had conquered fear and built something lasting and beautiful from the ashes of pain. And on warm spring evenings, when the wind rustled through the oak leaves and the setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold, it was easy to imagine them there still, sitting together as they had done so many times in life, hands clasped, hearts joined, two souls who had found their home in each other and never let go.